Hello, I'm Michael Tremaine, and I'm doing an oral presentation on why stem cell research should be considered ethical. For over 100 years, we've been innovating in the medical field on how to better sanitize, diagnose, and treat various conditions, sicknesses, or diseases. One such newer innovation is the use of stem cells and stem cell therapy. However, people have been deeming the research process on stem cells, specifically the embryonic ones, as unethical. The reason being is that the embryo is destroyed when taking the stem cells from it. However, I still believe the stem cell research should be considered ethical on embryonic stem cells because of how stem cell therapy will lead to a way better treatment for these conditions. The embryos are the stem cells from the embryos are taken ethically, and there's not a better alternative to the embryonic stem cell as people think there are. Embryonic stem cells are considered to be pluripotent, meaning that they can change into any type of cell in the body. Brain cells, nervous cells, blood cells, anything, you name it, from the human body. Because of this is why they are thought to be able to treat so many diseases. The ones looked into currently are macular degeneration, Parkinson's disease, diabetes, spinal cord injury, and multiple sclerosis and cancer. Specifically for cancer, as an example, the way they treat it is by using stem cells to replace the benevolent cells killed off by chemotherapy. Because in chemotherapy, the chemotherapy destroys the cancer cells, but it also destroys some benevolent cells in the body that are needed to live, which is why chemotherapy is so risky. However, if you use the stem cells to replace whatever cells are to be destroyed, the benevolent ones to be destroyed by the chemotherapy, it is going to help lessen the risk of chemotherapy on cancer patients. On top of that, other examples to be used to explain this is how in diabetes you can use stem cells to create cells to make insulin that the body of a diabetic so needs. However, people still believe that the research on stem cells, or on embryonic stem cells, is unethical. Well, what they do is they destroy the embryo, or the blastocyst rather, which is a day 5 embryo, to get these right here, this inner cell mass of stem cells. This is where all the stem cells they get are. But they have to destroy the embryo or the blastocyst to get those. People then tie this debate into the abortion debate because of how it's destroying an embryo before becoming a baby or a human baby before it has an even chance to. However, this is different because the embryonic stem cells are taken from embryos that are to be discarded in vitro fertility clinics. So what happens is, in these clinics, people donate embryos to be used for people who cannot make embryos. However, after the end of the use of all the donors' embryos, there's still some embryos left that are to be not used. So either the in vitro fertility clinic has to pay a large sum of money to keep these embryos frozen in a container, or they just discard them and they just kill them off anyway. They just throw them away. That's what they do. That's what they do already. So instead of that, scientists use the to be discarded embryos as a way to obtain the stem cells from them. So they're getting it from something that's going to be killed off anyway. So nothing. There's no embryos that are being saved by not practicing stem cell research on embryos. So this is just, and instead of just deleting them and having no other purpose for them, we're using them to help research how to help save other people's lives from these horrible diseases. On top of that, they're taken with the donor's consent. The donor has to consent to the usage of these stem cells from their discarded embryos. So they can say no if they just want it to be discarded, or the chance of it to be further frozen. But they have the opportunity to sign a consent waiver to use these embryos that they donated to be discarded as donations to the research field of them. A statistic from a journal article named "Willingness to Donate Frozen Embryos for Stem Cell Research" says that out of 1,020 respondents, over half of them said they would donate their leftover embryos for stem cell research. If that statistic applies to everybody, all donators, like over half for all the donators, then there's a significant amount of embryos to be used, discarded embryos to be used to help further the study of this amazing innovation to the medical field. Also, I mentioned earlier that people believe that there is a better alternative to the embryonic stem cell. They believe that adult stem cells, also called somatic stem cells, are not as controversial, which they're right, as the embryonic stem cells, because they're taken from people that will donate them that are still alive. They either take them from umbilical cords, from bones, from a bunch of different places. However, people miss the fact that these stem cells aren't pluripotent. They are considered to be multipotent. These multipotent stem cells, as shown by this diagram, can only be turned into the type of cell they came from. For example, brain stem cells can all become neural stem cells. The heart stem cells can be only cardiac stem cells, and blood stem cells can only be blood stem cells, and so on and so forth. So they can only really turn into like the general area of what those stem cells came from, which is a whole lot less useful than the pluripotent or the stem cell that can work everywhere, like the embryonic ones could. On top of them not being as good as the embryonic stem cell, they're also a lot harder to get because there's in so small quantities that's hard to extract from the certain areas. So embryonic stem cells, as I've proven earlier, they're not taken unethically. They're taken ethically and with the consent of the donor, and they're better than the adult stem cells. Also, shown in this flow diagram, it's shown that these are this is the flow of what happens to an embryo that isn't to be used. As shown, it always leads to either being discarded or donated, as I've said earlier. So with all this considered, it's really obvious how stem cells, or embryonic stem cells, should be considered ethical because of the fact that it can treat so many diseases, unending diseases, just from this research. That's why I believe that this practice should be considered ethical and should be continued to be studied so that we can cure or treat all these many diseases. Thank you.